Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Romantic Dinner with the DM. I am Arcad, and joined with us we have, of course, the ever-lovely
Prime.
And our guest for today is none other than Shane. Shane, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Beautiful. So Shane is one of the guests we actually found through Twitter, and as we were talking about a little bit earlier, you've got years and years of experience, and you also have, rightfully strong opinions and things that you believe in and believe in strongly, and you're not afraid to talk about it. And that was actually the biggest thing that really drew us to you and got us wanting to talk to you. So, I'll let Prime sort of take over here for a sec.
Yeah, so excellent guest today. And Shane, I will just check in with you, actually. Is it AuldShaneGamer to direct folks to find you?
Yep.
All right.
That's my Discord and my Twitter, and I haven't really done much else with social media. I'm kind of a trog that way,
Beautiful. So AuldShaneGamer, everybody, it's going to be an excellent time and 40 plus years of gaming experience, right?
Yeah, I'm on the plus right now. So
beautiful. All right, well, let's just jump right in. So Shane, if there were a D&D version of Tinder, what would your bio look like?
Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm a trog, and I was already married when Tinder came out, so I have no idea what to put. So I'm just going to give you kind of a little, I guess, like if I was on the dating game bio, I will just say that, I consider myself kind of an RPG evangelist, and I'll explain that in a bit. I've been at this for 4 decades. I also play guitar and do sculpture with ceramics.
Oh, wow.
Love to try new foods, and my favorite place in the world would be on a beach.
Oh, is there a particular beach? Like, do you have like one favorite beach that you hold all other beaches to that standard?
See, fortunately, I've been to some wonderful places because I was in the Navy. So, I could narrow it down. I really enjoyed Trinidad, not just because of the scenery, but the people in Trinidad are wonderful. I also fortunate enough to go to Mazatlan, again, a beautiful place, and wonderful people, and oh my gosh, the seafood.
Oh, yeah.
Loved it.
I love that.
And and then of course everybody always talks about Hawaii. However, I've been to 3 islands now. Oahu's okay if you stick to the north side. I've been to Maui, which I enjoyed, but holy cow, is that expensive. My favorite island so far, I would say, is Kauai, because it's not touristy, and they've taken steps there in their municipality to keep it that way. It's a wonderful, it's like, I guess if you want to kind of get a real feel for Hawaii, Kauai is it. But they all have their wonderful things. So it's just, if there's tropical fruit and rum and the rolling ocean, I'm good.
That's beautiful.
That's absolutely perfect. Also, I just personally have to say I love that Trinidad was in there, because my family, my father's from Jamaica and my grandfather's from St. Vincent. Oh. So we spend a lot of time out there. We did Trinidad and Tobago and loved it. So that's excellent. Beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I really, the people there were, I don't know how to describe it. You go to a foreign country, and of course the shopkeepers are going to be open and welcoming, but just regular people, everybody was so cool. And, it's a beautiful country, and they're beautiful people, and yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's so wonderful.
Amazing.
So, a little bit of history of the travel, which is beautiful, but now into the real stuff, into what you all came here for, listeners. I know what you want. You want one thing, and it's D&D. Me too. TTRPGs. And so, Shane, what is your history?
I thought we were going to say dice, but okay.
Well, that too. Okay. You can never have enough dice. But yeah, give us your history.
Anyway, started playing in 1980, and I actually started as a DM. I will get into how that happened in a
Whoa.
second. But D&D was not the only one. One of the few really beautiful things about the 80s was there was a TTRPG explosion because the industry was figuring itself out. TSR was kind of dominated, but they were. I'll just say it was weird and leave it at that. There was Gamma World, which is like a post-apocalyptic. Like if you combined Mad Max and the X-Men, that's what Gamma World was.
Whoa! I love that.
Top secret, just like it sounds, it's a spy game. Boot Hill, Western-themed RPG, and in the Dungeon Master's Guide in the original edition, they actually had conversion things for Boot Hill and D&D, so the possibilities there were pretty cool. Star Frontiers, Marvel Superheroes, then Kevin Symbiote started Palladium Games, and there was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Robotech, Heroes Unlimited, all kinds of different things, and even really silly, goofy games. One of my favorite ones, it was Toon by Steve Jackson Games, and yes, you played a cartoon character.
Oh my gosh.
And the beautiful thing about this game is you never died. You just fell down. You actually fell down, just like in the cartoons, for 2 minutes of real time, and then you got back up and kept going.
That is so neat.
And then when I got into the Navy, let's see, it was Shadowrun, which, cyberpunk, we all know what that stuff is. Mm-hmm. Then there was another one that a friend of mine that I met in the Navy from Portland, it was a game called Aftermath, which it wasn't so much important as why, but basically society had broken down and you're trying to survive in the aftermath of a broken down society. It kept to science and stuff like that. There wasn't really a magical element to it, but one of the great things it had was it had a really good combat mechanic system, so that was fun. And just over the years, so many different things. Played every version of D&D. My boys for last Christmas just got me the second edition of Pathfinder, so I'm digging into that. I found, I've been fortunate enough to experience so many games that it's really more about, just about every game I've come across has got some great mechanics and some things that aren't so great. And so it's really more a matter of how you use the tools that are at your disposal to kind of create this cooperative story and fun experience. And I think that's what's more important than, whatever system happens to be your favorite. I'm not going to sit here and bash, this system is better than that, because, it depends on your personality, what kind of game you're trying to play. To me, the biggest thing is, are we having fun? Cool. That's what matters.
That's such a great mentality to have, because people love to pull favorites when it comes to anything in life, and I just love that approach.
And I have my personal favorites, but I like playing other systems partly because I like to see how other people, especially, I've been like a 95% game runner. So, the few opportunities I get to be a player and see how somebody else runs a thing that is fun for me, because invariably I'm like, hey, I can use that next time. Only other thing I want to say, when I first got into RPGs, a whole lot of really kind of negative, dark, bad stuff going on in my life. And, some people think I'm, that it's hyperbole, but, I sincerely believe I am still here today because I got into RPGs. It's a very powerful thing, and that's part of the reason why I want so many people to play and why I work so hard to bring so many people in, because I want them to have that joy. So many of my friends that I met through gaming, had similar things and, were in similar things, and, we kind of helped to these creative things, making these worlds and playing through these scenarios. And it was in some ways it was therapeutic, but we built strong bonds, and I think it's such a positive force despite some of the negative press by really stupid people. And I think it's a thing that can benefit just about everybody, and that's why it's so important to me to, my slogan has been for so many years, everybody plays. And I fully, I believe that with all my heart. Everyone should play. Mm-hmm. Unless you're going to be an absolute, insert a bunch of bad words here, and then you need to go.
Yeah.
But for everybody else who's going to be a decent human being, yes, please, let's play.
I love that so much. And I truly do believe as well, D&D has such an ability to be a catharsis for people. It's like you said, it can be therapeutic. And even at the base of it, right, there are so many things that can be done with it. That's the beauty of TTRPGs, is the limit is your imagination, right? But even at its core, that idea of having a group of people who you meet with, who you talk with, having that sense of community on even that basic level, I feel like that's incredible.
100%, yeah. And so to circle back a little bit, when you were talking about this progression, you said that the very, very first time you sat down, you were running the game, and you were in that GM DM position. So let's talk a little bit about that. What led you to that? How did you feel about it? Just kind of your take on the whole thing.
Okay, so when I first started, again, this was 1980. I was in the 4th grade. My cousin, who was 3 years older than me, he had just recently passed from a year-long battle with a brain tumor. He was only 13, and I was trying to, in my 10-year-old brain, figure out why this happened. My cousin, he was a good kid. He was helpful. He did stuff in the community, and he was physically active and healthy. And how did this happen? It didn't make any sense. And of course, the adults in my family, everybody was just as hurt and dumbstruck, and so there wasn't really any help that way. So like I say, I was in this horrible place. It just, the whole world felt wrong. And one of the things that I had turned to was I got really big into writing stories. Before that, probably starting in like the 1st grade, I tried to do like little comic strips like I read and stuff. But getting into writing along, it started with short stories, but going with that. And some of my classmates, they knew I liked to do this, and one day they came up and they said, "Hey, would you like to be a dungeon master?" What's a dungeon master? So they explained what Dungeons and Dragons was, and the dungeon master was the person who basically ran the story. I'm like, oh, okay, so I create a story. That's kind of cool. And then I was kind of stuck on, well, how do we do this together? And you say it's a game. How does this all work? And so they kind of explain that, we go through, and then they have to make certain choices, and then there's a probability, and that's why they roll the dice to see if they succeed or fail. I was like, okay. And so then one of them pulls out the monster manual, and at that age, I'd started on comics, and I was just starting to get into mythology. And so I don't know if you've ever seen the first cover of the AD&D Monster Manual, but you've got centaurs and dragons and creatures I'd never seen before, like purple worms and all on this cover. And they held up the book, and they said, "You get to use everything in this book to help you tell the story." And I was like, oh, what?
That's beautiful.
And so that is how it started. And that first group, there were 2 boys. They had just come from, I can't remember if it was Cambodia or Laos, just a couple years before. And then there was this one black girl that played with us. And there was this one Latino boy that we were all sure was gay, but in 1980, you didn't talk about that, especially in the 4th grade. but we all knew, we accepted it. We didn't care because he was a fun person. He was fun to play games with, and so on. And then there were a couple. This is really going to make you guys laugh. The two other guys were two boys from my church youth group.
Oh.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
Now
I'm just gonna let that sink in, and let the vibes go, and hopefully hit Pat Robertson upside the head. Sorry, I'm digressing there. Anyway, I was very fortunate that my first D&D group was extremely diverse, because from that point on, in my mind, that's like how it should be.
That's
right?
Perfect.
I feel extremely fortunate that was how it got started. And the very first 5 sessions, I never looked at the DM's guide. I never looked at the player's handbook. If it came up to combat, I said okay, now how do we do this again real quick? And they say, okay, this is our AC. And I was like, okay, cool. So I looked through, and it says, okay, you guys come up against this, and so do your thing, and then we played, and we made these great stories, and some of them were ridiculous, and sometimes I did really goofy things that were completely contrary to the rules, but nobody cared, because we were having fun, and we were creating this just ridiculous, heroic, epically nuts thing that was I can't even explain it. I will say that I was in a lot of ways pretty heavily influenced by The Hobbit. My dad gave me that to read in the first grade. So I was like, oh, there's dwarves and there's elves and all these cool things, and wow, this is and then later I fell into D&D, and then like I said, shortly after that, I'm going to the store to get D&D stuff, and then what's this? This is a different game, and then what's this? This is oh my gosh, it's all these different games, and so yeah, that was how my TTRPG empire began, from humble origins.
And so much of what you described there, it seems like really set the tone for you, in terms of not only
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny because and I don't know why after all these years this is one of the things that sticks with me, but I remember before my parents got divorced, we were living in this one place, and the house had been it was a bigger house that had been kind of divided up. And we had the upper part, and below us was a Japanese family, and they had a little girl who was the same age as me. I can remember her name as Uni. I just thought it was kind of a cool name. Mm-hmm. And then next door to us was a black family, and it was Robert. And then across the street was a Mexican family and a little boy Jose, and we all played together. And obviously, I was aware, okay, he's got darker skin, her eyes look different, but it was like, who cares? We're all just kids. We all look different, but everybody looks different. I mean, I look different than my parents, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
We're all uniquely human beings. And so, like, from the age of 4, I like I say again, I was fortunate that my experiences led me to just look at everybody as hey, we're just all people. We all have different backgrounds and different stories and different hurts, but at the end of the day, we're all human beings, none of us better or worse. And as I got older, I recognized that, and I'm trying not to sound preachy here, but being born a white male, obviously my life wasn't perfect. I had hurts, but even from an early age, I knew that some things were just inherently easier for me.
Yeah.
And so having all these diverse friends, I kind of, it was important to me that they were happy and that they were having good experiences as well. Obviously not just talking about gaming now, but just, in general.
In life, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And please, if I'm trying to make myself sound like I'm coming off as a saint, I'm not, because I'm definitely not. But it has been something that's been important to me from a very early age, that we all treat each other fairly and equally, regardless of our skin color, gender, sexual orientation or lack thereof, or, wherever we're landing, we need to, as human beings, just take care of each other and, love each other and help each other. And, the gaming space, I'm so excited. I got on Twitter a couple years ago, just started doing it, and, contact all these different people and all these things that I had no idea was going on, both good and bad. And, it like electrified me and energized me and really wanted to push this forward and help make, we're in a new millennium, for goodness sakes.
Mm-hmm.
We should be doing better.
Absolutely.
We really should be.
And I think it's such an important thing. Like even for you, hearing you say, my first or one of my first, I think it was your first D&D campaign, had a black woman in it. It's, for me, I am a black woman, and I remember I started trying to play D&D in high school, and I'd always kind of had this interest in fantasy. I read The Hobbit in grade school as well, and I thought it was the best thing I'd ever read, like this idea of adventure and dragons and gold and mountains and dwarves and tales and songs. And I remember a lot of the time feeling like there was kind of like a gate that I wasn't really allowed to cross over to, because a lot of the times it would be something like, I remember the first time I ever wanted to do a TTRPG, some of my friends were talking about it, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to do that. And I wanted to play like this caveman type person. And I remember the first thing was, well, no, you can't. Cavemen weren't black. And it was so many things like that. And so it's just so wonderful to hear that, well, my experience might have been a bit more gated. At least there were people out there then who were making it not so, because still sometimes you'll hear people say things, well, black people don't play D&D, and it's so ignorant, but they think they're coming from a place of historical accuracy. And I just love hearing that, no, you're wrong, because even in the 80s, there were people who did not think like that.
And I just want to say, I also have an interest in archaeology and anthropology, and, whoever might be listening to this, know that the first cavemen were dark-skinned.
Yeah. And that's the thing with so many things.
Out of Africa, moving up to Europe. I don't know why they moved up there, because it's colder. I don't know what they were thinking, but follow the food, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Even if, historical accuracy, whatever, we're talking about a fantasy world born of somebody's imagination. Gary Gygax was just like completely enamored with Tolkien. And so the first foray into RPGs, he tried to pattern after that. But what a lot of people forget is he didn't stop there. Now, I'm not going to name the name of some of the titles that they came out with because they were horribly offensive, and I'm not trying to defend Gary Gygax, because while I do think we owe him a debt of gratitude for getting things rolling, he was very much a product of his time, and it did some things that maybe could have been done better. Mm-hmm. But the point is, we're not talking about the real world anymore. I've been complaining for a long time now that Wizards of the Coast needs to quit recycling Europe. Sure, it's easy to keep doing the Forgotten Realms over and over and over. But there is so much rich stuff out there that would sell like mad. If you look at just Hindu mythology, holy crap. First of all, they have literally over 1 million gods, or 1 billion gods, depending on who you talk to. These, historically, 4, 5, 6,000 years of heroic stories passed down, not just verbally, but written down. And that's just in the Indian subcontinent. The empires of West Africa that one day just kind of collapsed. All those rich stories and mythology and all these other things. and even just completely made up stuff that's not even anything to do with anything on our planet. Why does it just have to be Northern Europe?
Mm-hmm.
It's boring to me.
Well, absolutely. And why does it just have to be the reflection of one person or one group of people's experience? But yet so much of, especially Western culture, we really do tend to, I feel like, romanticize one part of history or one type of experience. And so many of us
Absolutely.
and so many of us are excited and open and would love more. But then conversely, there are also so many of us who, for some reason, want to protect that institution. And I don't understand, because more variety and more representation, I just think that's great. I don't understand why one would want to retell the same story over and over when there are so many other stories. But alas.
Yeah. And I also, it's kind of funny because my family is mostly, Northern European, whatever. However, one of my uncles, he remarried, and he met this Chinese woman in Hawaii when he was stationed there. So I actually have two cousins who are half Chinese. And so I also grew up with that whole, I actually have Asian people in my family. What I learned about that. Speaking of another treasure trove of history, I mean, China has been going continuously for 6,000 years now?
Mm-hmm.
And the millions of heroic stories and the different mythological things, coupled with the influences of Buddhism and Confucianism and all these other things. And, all the different weapon and armor styles of the different regions and all these different things. I'm not here to say, we should never do any kind of European stuff again. No, that's dumb, because that's fun too.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, one of the things that I really loved about the first Thor movie was, most of the people were your typical Viking whatever. But obviously, Heimdall was a black man. And then I can't remember his name in the comics, but the one fellow who was obviously very Asian looking. And what people don't really realize is that in Eastern Scandinavia, there are people who look more Asian than the white Nordic whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And considering how far some of the traders from Northern Africa in that area, and even Southeast Asia, some of them went way north. And so to have this diverse cast of a, Scandinavian mythology, if you look at the composition of what all was considered, the Viking, Teutonic, whatever area, there were some dark-skinned people and there were some Asian-looking people. And so, I mean, if you want to talk about historical accuracy, Marvel's treatment of Thor was probably more historically accurate than most people want to admit.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's
and people I'm glad you mentioned Tolkien earlier, because it's as you said, so much of fantasy is this extraordinarily whitewashed version of things, right? All the elves are white, all the dwarves are white, all the humans are white, and it's created this box that I think so many people are unwilling to break free from. And it kind of it leads into sort of a lot of different things there. I'm sure we could talk about Tolkien's influence for that'd be a whole podcast episode on its own. But when you're
absolutely
to distill some of that down a little bit, when you're DMing yourself personally, and you have a group of players at the table, regardless of regardless of all the other factors, there are some really hard themes that come up when you're at the table, whether it be based on mental health, whether it be based on racial inequality, or any number of other things. How do you, in that position, all the way back when you were 10 years old to now, how do you keep your players safe, and how do you believe, or what do you believe that the DM's role needs to be in that sort of position?
Well, one of the first things I did right off, because I wanted us all to get along and have fun, was that I basically said that except in specific instances where it might make sense that players might be, or not players, characters might be working at cross purposes, that the basic idea was that these people came together for a reason and are going to work together. They're not going to try to stab each other in the back. They're not going to pick fights with each other, because we get so much of that crap in the real world as it is. And just from, before I ever got into D&D, I mean, we all played, cops and robbers and army and whatever. There's always the argument, I shot you, no, you didn't. And just the petty squabbling, just that I basically set a rule for the players that they need to work together as a team, not try and undercut each other, not, have their character do things that would be detrimental to the character. A lot of the stuff I didn't really even have the words for because I was only in 4th grade. But, as I've gotten older, and now with this new generation of players that have come through the whole concept of a session 0 where, people sit down, and hey, what kind of things make you uncomfortable? What kind of things, trigger you? What kind of things would you not want to play through? And conversely, what kind of things are really important to you? What things do you really want to play through? So we're setting the groundwork to begin with, and also out of character, the players themselves, that, we all treat each other respectfully. There's no comment of, you're doing this wrong, that's stupid. That's I don't allow that. And then, as the years have gone by, there've been conflicts, but I also, and sometimes this is hard, especially if you're just doing pickup groups, you do a bunch of one shots and stuff, and maybe you're meeting different people. But one thing I try and do is, if I can, I try and talk with each person individually, because sometimes it's hard to bring things up in front of a group, especially say, I was doing drop-ins at my local game store before everything went to crap, and this one girl came with her boyfriend. She thought it sounded kind of interesting. Mostly into anime and stuff, but she thought she'd try this. But very quiet. I ended up finding out later that she actually has really bad social anxiety and stuff. A person like that is not going to speak up and tell you what bugs them. Especially, she's not confident. She's never even played the game before. So, I try and, even if it's just 5 minutes, just give the person time in a little bit more private things. Hey, is there anything that, is really going to trip you up? Because at the end of the day, this is supposed to be fun, right?
Of course, yeah.
And we don't want to be hurting people's feelings. And, sometimes it is the strangest things, but if you know that, then you can guide things in such a way that, you might touch on some things, but you don't have to really get into the really ugly and, the visceral stuff that's really going to get somebody triggered. And another thing that I started doing kind of early is that, if people want to get into romantic stuff, okay, but once it gets past a certain point, that's we're going to cut to commercial break, and you guys can, if you want to, you can talk about what happened. You can tell me about it later, but we're not going to sit in and get into the gushy details at the table with everybody else. Now, I've had groups that, they're totally cool with that, and again, if you have a session 0 setting out, what you want to accomplish, how you want to play, what you're comfortable with, what you're not, then that kind of stuff is cool. But it's just, bottom line, you need to make sure that you're not going to do something that's going to hurt somebody.
Right.
And I'm just talking about emotionally. If there's an argument between players and things start getting to pushing and shoving, we break right there and we separate the people and let people calm down. We talk it through or whatever. But there's only been one instance I can think of that ever happened. But holy cow! First of all, I was just like, what? Why are they smacking at each other? It's just, and then it's like, oh shit, I need to stop this. So
yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's like, this is something that I love. I want other people to love, and I want them to have a good experience. So, I guess the biggest thing is I try and look it through the other person's eyes, and I know it's going to hurt me, so I try and put myself like, okay, what do I think is going to hurt this person, so we cannot do that.
And that's such a simple thing, but so effective.
And it in some ways it's simple, but in other ways it takes a little effort, because not everybody is good at empathizing things from other people's side, and sometimes people bring things up and you're like, really? But I might think that on the inside, but I would never say that to them, because oh my gosh, that's going to make them clam up, never come back, and I don't want to do that. So okay, we will work around that. There's a reason that when TTRPG started, the DM was more often actually referred to as a referee, because I don't know if you how much you know about the history of things, but it actually started, they were doing miniature wargaming, reenacting historical battles.
Right, yeah.
And there was so much argument and confusion about, oh, well, this can would have done this. So it started with these guys in Minnesota who were actually war game nuts, that somebody was designated as, okay, you're the final arbitrator. This has this much range. And that's how the whole thing started. And then, and I don't, fully know, because some of this history I learned fairly recently, but at some point they started, well, what if Napoleon had a wizard? And it just kind of slowly grew from there. And there's source books out there. People have made a couple movies. Some I don't want to mention because I think they're extremely biased, and I think they kind of do a disservice to the hobby as a whole. That is just my view, so that's why I'm not going to mention the name one way or another, because I don't want to color other people's view. But and see, that's why, even though there are some things that I like about first edition D&D, there's also a lot of things that I'm glad that have gone away. And I think, maybe another 5-10 years, maybe we'll have a 6th edition, and we'll have learned more, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll have learned, and we'll make a better system and a better game and a better experience. There's people who are, some who actually started, who are a little bit older than me, who've, they've been passing this on to their grandkids, and now some of them their great grandkids. So we want to make sure that it's growing and, moving forward positively.
Right, as opposed to backsliding and, falling into old things that have, been, explored and dealt with, and said, okay, you know what? There's a better way to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And especially, just being inclusive.
Yeah.
And if one of my biggest things, I love it when players come up with weird ideas. And, fortunately, here recently, one of the people in my group that was at the gaming store, they offered to, kind of DM and give me a break and let me play. And so this evolved into, well, my most recent character is a red panda sun soul monk.
Ooh, that's so cool.
Amazing.
Oh.
Now, this whole thing got started because I saw a picture of these two red pandas. First of all, I think red pandas are some of the most beautiful animals in the world. It's almost criminal how cute they are, and yet, they'll bite you if you do dumb things because they are wild animals. But anyway, it was a picture of these two red pandas, and they were coming at each other, and they had their arms up in the air, and they looked like teddy bears, and they've got that face, and their arms and they're up. It's like, oh my God, it's so cute. No. When red pandas feel threatened, they throw their hands up in the air and extend their claws to make themselves look bigger. So no, they don't want to pick you up. They're going to tear you up.
Mm-hmm. That's a threat.
So then we got to thinking, that would be like a really cool kind of, racial surprise attack that, you run up to him with your arms up. Oh, this is so cute. Oh my God, he's punching me. He's biting me. What? And so we set up this thing was that if on a red panda's first attack, if they're attacking someone who hasn't fought yet, they basically get advantage on the first thing because it's like, oh, it's cute. Oh, it's killing me.
I love that.
And so that is how Tai Young Shao was born, which I apologize because, I looked this up on Google Translate because, no, I don't speak Chinese, even though I have Chinese cousins. And it roughly translates to burning sun hand.
Perfect.
Or burning hand.
Yeah.
Something like that. And it was so cool because I was talking about this character, and one of the greatest things is somebody, they wanted to draw, normally they commission stuff, but they wanted to draw this character so badly they said they'd do it for me for free. And no, I got to give you something. But yeah, I'm geeking out because somebody's doing fan art of one of my original characters. Holy crap. And I don't know if you've seen the pictures I posted, but it came out beautifully. And it was done by... Their Twitter handle is @CatFangArt, and they do a lot of animal type stuff. But this was like the first kind of D&D character, and they wanted to do this, and it came out so beautifully. I'm having a hassle transferring money out of Venmo because Venmo and PayPal don't like to talk to each other, so I have to transfer it to another account. That's a separate issue. See, I'm going tangentially there, but I just. I wanted to pay them something because, side note, yes, pay your creators.
Always.
Don't try and shortchange them. Pay your creators, pay them well, pay your artists because art feeds my soul and I want to make sure the artists have food to eat. So pay your creators, damn it.
Yes. Heck yes. I think
anyway,
we almost need to repeat that just for the folks in the back.
Yes, pay your creators.
Yes.
Pay your creators, pay them well, pay them properly, don't shortchange them.
Mm-hmm.
But, and that's the thing. A lot of times people, well, I want to play this while it's not in the rules. So I love it when people come up with all these weird ideas. In the campaign we had before, and I'm not sure what got me started. Oh, okay. Actually, I do remember what got me started on this. Another person that I follow on Twitter, @NoMedic, lots of really cool gaming insights on lots of really cool stuff. And posted this thing one day. It was a set of dice, these really vibrant, hot pink dice, and was asking for character ideas that would go with these dice. And I'm like, okay, what? And all of a sudden, which happens because with ADD, my brain just goes everywhere, and I ask myself really weird questions. I suddenly asked myself, what would happen if David Bowie and Prince had a tiefling baby that grew up to be a bard?
Oh my goodness.
I love that so much. Oh.
And then I started running with it. I'm like, okay, and they were raised by Elton John and Freddie Mercury.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
And so I started going with this, and so I finally came up with, and they actually started out as a wizard, but with all this stuff, like I say, I've been learning so much on Twitter, and I'm not going to pretend that I understand what it's like to be a person, wherever you land in the queer rainbow. I'm not even going to pretend to, understand what that is like. But I can say that I have very often in my life felt very alone. Partly, my parents moved around a lot and stuff, and it was hard for me to reach out to people. And a lot of times when I did, we all grew up. We all remember some kids in school can be jerks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And so, this is another thing that I'm really grateful for RPGs, is that it brought me out of myself. I know I seem very outgoing and stuff, but it is a learned behavior. I'm still very much an introvert. It is hard for me to reach out to people, but I know the benefits, so I force myself now. So just the idea of, I was kind of playing around with that, and so I finally came up with this idea of this tiefling they identify as a non-binary person. And even though they do like people and want to reach out, they have this strange, they cannot stand to be touched for some reason. It's borderline painful. And, also growing up, their father was the typical monstrous tiefling.
Mm-hmm.
Powerful lord among tieflings, whatever, and kept trying to get my character married off. Well, my character happened to have a very close friend who's like, hey, I'll just pose as your fiance to get your dad off your back.
Beautiful.
Great, right? Sounds beautiful. Dad found out.
Oh no.
Dad figured it out. Dad killed said best friend. So now, on top of the physical problem, there is the emotional tragedy of, oh my God, did I get my friend killed? And that's what I started with at first level with the character that I call my beloved Magenta Rain.
Oh.
I think I saw actually the photos.
I've had...
Or the image of that character on your Twitter.
Yeah, you've probably... Because I've posted that mini a lot that my friend has painted because, oh my God, it's so good. But I've had a lot of fun with that character, and I've also explored a lot. And for one thing, I've definitely learned a lot about myself, but I think I have a better insight. And again, I'm not trying to say that I, even pretend to understand what it is like to live, a person living, on, whatever level of, queer, transgender, whatever it is that they're experiencing. But I think I got a much greater appreciation for just how hard it is. And again, being a straight white male, how much easier my life is than so many people. And, some of these people are very close friends of mine. And if nothing else, I think it's helped me grow as a person. And I mean, holy crap, the fact that, playing D&D helped me grow as a person. Isn't that a wonderful thing?
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really sort of like the ultimate kind of way of like, people always talk about how, you should put yourself in someone else's shoes, put yourself in someone else's,
Mm-hmm.
Try and think about it from their perspective. Right. What a literal interpretation of that, you know?
Truly put yourself in the full body in a way, right? And in the mind. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And so I have to ask, what side of the table then
Yes.
is the preference? Is it the DM side or is it the player side?
That is such a hard question because first of all, most of the time I have just not had the opportunity to be a player because see, the problem with being a good DM is once everybody finds out, everybody wants you to be the DM.
Oh yeah, they do. A good DM is rare.
And,
that's why we had to do a whole podcast to celebrate y'all.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
My first 2 years of D&D was as a DM before somebody finally said, hey, let me take over for a little bit. Let you play a character. And I straight up ripped off the Ranger from the D&D cartoon.
Perfect.
A half-elf Ranger, green armor, blonde hair. And I was exceedingly fortunate because I managed to, and this is back when, you could level forever in, first edition. I actually took him all the way up to level 35.
Wow.
And finally just had him retire in his, basically this fortress that he had over the years built around, not on, but around this, thousands of year old oak built around it. And he had attracted followers to help protect the forest. And, about half of them were awakened animals before we even used that term. And then he, just finally got old and moved on. And so, my first experience was great. And then my second character, Paladin, I only made it to level 3.
Oh, no.
It's okay because I did this on purpose. We were getting totally overwhelmed. We weren't going to make it. And so I did the classic, you go on, I'll hold them off thing. Right?
Oh, nice. Honorable.
Now, part of it was, up until this point, I had really been kicking ass as a paladin. First, I rolled really good stats, so I was a very good paladin. And I had been really looking at rolls. And I'm thinking, yeah, I can make it through this. And the monsters just kept coming and coming and coming. And I took a lot with me. But, I did finally succumb. But the party got away, so the bards were singing my praises long after I was dead.
Amazing.
That's so good. And usually,
so as far as preference, that's tough because, like, whenever I'm DMing, I get these character ideas and gosh, that'd be fun to play. And then, as a player, I'm used to running the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And if I say it, it happens. Now, I'm a player. I am one being fighting against this universe, trying to stay alive, trying to keep my friends alive. And the whole time I'm feeling so powerless. It doesn't matter if I'm 20th level. I'm just like, I can't. What do I do? No. Yeah. So I love it all. I love the whole process. I love being a DM. I love having the chance to only have to worry about one character and not the whole universe. Sometimes that is such a nice break, as all I have to worry about is the decisions that this one creature makes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I find
I just have to focus on this small set of abilities that this one person has.
It's perfect.
So, yeah.
And I find usually, the thing with exceptional DMs is they are still very much players. They're many players. They are several players all at once. They're players and world and universe and enemies, but that's so much to take on.
And I was also in theater in high school, so there's that whole aspect of it too.
Voices?
I'm doing
Do you
this
do
whole
voices?
Okay. The voices thing, yep, I knew that was going to come up. So, as a little kid, I probably watched too much television. But one thing it did give me was I noticed right away that there were some people on television that talked exactly like my family and people I knew. And there were other people that talked funny. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could talk like some of those people? So, here I am, first grade. PBS lineup, because back then we only had 4 channels, one of them being PBS.
Mm-hmm.
And first it's Sesame Street, and then Mr. Rogers, God rest him, and then Electric Company, which a lot of people don't know, but that's where Morgan Freeman got his start.
Oh, I did not.
I also didn't know that.
And then after that, another funny side note, after that was a local person was doing yoga. So here I am, first grade, I'm doing yoga. And one time my mom comes in and I'm all pretzeled up. So that was fun. But then after that was Masterpiece Theater. And everyone's talking like this. Oh, they're 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 talking like this. And it was just like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So I'm trying to sound like all these different people. And then, just different things. I I love the sound of different accents. I love hearing how people from different countries say things. I'm obviously in this modern climate, I'm much more careful about what I do, especially if I have other than white people in the group, because I don't want to be hurtful, making it sound like I'm trying to sound like Abu from The Simpsons, because that's not what I'm trying to do. Mm-hmm. I try and use these different voices, but I always try and do it respectfully. Mm-hmm. I never use an accent when I'm trying to do a comical character.
That's a great rule.
I was just thinking
that's
that.
Exceptional.
Well, it's just the thing is, even if a person, even if they're just trying to do something funny, it is so easy to slip into the grossly, horribly offensive stereotypes that we've seen in so many movies. And especially some of these movies where you've got people who are Native Americans playing Chinese people, and you've got Mexican people playing Native Americans, and you've got Vietnamese and Korean people all playing Japanese people, because nobody makes movies about people in Vietnam or Korea. So it's a thing that I think you have to be careful with. You can be respectful with it, and there's a good way to bring flavor, but you never want to be using one of these accents in a diminutive way for one of your NPCs, because, well, okay, for instance, people meet me, they look at me, they wouldn't know that I have Chinese cousins. Mm-hmm. But you're damn right, I'm going to be offended if somebody is being derisive or dismissive towards Chinese people. I mean, this last year has been an absolute nightmare. I started hearing about all these people attacking anybody who looked remotely Asian, saying that they brought COVID. No, you insert a bunch of bad words here. They didn't bring mm-hmm. COVID. Their family might have been here more generations than yours have.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And part of the thing that really burned me is that one of my cousins, he is one of the top people at the National Institute of Health fighting this garbage.
And yet he's probably getting so much blame from people on the street.
And unnecessary hate for something he is responsible for fixing.
Fortunately, he is like 6'5" and broad shoulders, so I don't think he's getting a lot of crap, because he definitely got the height from the Nordic side of his dad. But he's still very clearly, you look at his face, he's very Chinese. He's just also a very tall Chinese man. So anyway, but again, it goes back to the whole thing is we want to have fun. We want to be respectful. And so, we just have to be careful. And even like, people of my ancestry, Irish and Norwegian and all that kind of stuff, and Scottish, I try not to, just accents in general, I try to avoid, them being a throwaway, comic trope kind of character, because, it doesn't matter where you come from. If you're knocking somebody's ancestry, that's just not cool.
Well, absolutely.
Plain and simple.
And I think this actually brings up something really, really important too, because, I firmly believe there is such a big difference between appropriation and appreciation. And the thing is, I know for me, I want representation. If I had a DM and they came to me and they said, hey, I'm thinking about doing a Jamaican character. How would you feel about that? I would feel that if their character is a fully rounded character that also happens to be Jamaican, yes, absolutely, go for it. Because here's the thing, being tokenized does not feel good, but being included from somebody who's coming from a place where they want to see diversity and they want to see representation, I think that is so important. And when somebody comes at it from a place of, okay, I'm very careful about how and when I do this, because I'm thinking of being respectful to people who might interpret it some sort of way, I think that's the most respectful and wonderful way to come from it. Because I know, there's a lot of people who will go, oh, well, okay, so I'm a writer, but, you're saying that I need to be inclusive, but you're saying I can't write about experiences that aren't mine. And then they act like those are the only two choices. Well, no, there's a middle ground. And the middle ground is to be respectful.
They're being flippant on purpose because don't want to examine their own prejudices and biases and realize, holy crap, I'm one of those people.
And that's so.
And
I think that's
I will
just
be
so
the
good.
I will be the first to admit, as open-minded as I've been, there have still been times that I have caught myself, and it's later because it's kind of the thing that progressives like, oh crap, what am I doing? I'll give you a really good example. Not necessarily proud of this, but one of the things, like I said, I was in the Navy, and at the time, we still had an agreement with the Philippines that people could just come directly in. They didn't necessarily have to go through the naturalization process because we had kind of the governments agreed on something somewhere and whatever. Anyway, and on my ship, it seemed like there were a lot of people from the Philippines who were in personnel and dispersing. They handle the pay and stuff like this, whatever. And I found myself saying things like, these stupid Filipinos, they're screwing up my pay. And all of a sudden, after a while, I was like, whoa, wait, what am I doing here? And personally, I think I've come a long way because if you talk to my parents, especially my father, yikes, that's all I'm going to say. But I also recognize, and I think it's important for everybody to recognize, I don't care what your background, everybody does have certain prejudices and certain preconceived notions and something that will trigger bad reactions. The important thing is, first of all, we can't act on those. We can't necessarily control our thoughts, but we can 100% control our actions. And we also need to honestly, why am I doing this? What is it? And I think for me, one of the biggest thing was I was frustrated in the Navy in general. So I was looking for a scapegoat. Again, I'm not proud of that. I actually, I feel pretty horrible that I resorted to that because I'd always tried to not be like what my parents were. But at the same time, we're human. And so it's just a thing that, like you said, there's a difference between appropriation and appreciation. One of these days, if I can, I have this concept for a character that I would love to play. Big, huge black fella, I'm thinking, like West African. His name is Intaba, which I can't remember if that is Swahili or what, but it basically means mountain. And I'm imagining this big, huge guy. Now, I wanted to play him as a barbarian, but he's not your typical, run around with the animals, bearskin, stuff like this. He's actually, I was thinking his background would be as a soldier. And growing up, one of the things, he tended with the animals and stuff. And as he got older and got more experience as a soldier, as a guard, he came to really admire animals. Because animals don't lie. Animals only kill to defend themselves or when they're hungry. And you just basically, he saw a nobility in animals that he didn't see in human beings. And it started to make him angry because humanoids are smarter than animals, but we act like the monsters. And so he's constantly got this rage boiling underneath, and that's what makes him the barbarian. Not that he's an uncivilized, dark-skinned person. He's actually very civilized. It's the rage that he can barely control.
And that's such a
that he hones. And the thing is, I actually do a pretty good West African accent, but I am so scared of playing that character because I don't want to come across as like, I'm trying to steal from Black Panther, which is not what I'm trying to do at all. There's so much really cool mythology in Western Africa, and I absolutely adore that culture. Anansi is one of my favorite mythical characters of ever, the spider god, and partly because he triumphs over much stronger foes with his brain. And I loved that. I absolutely loved that. And plus, his sons had all these cool different powers, but he was almost kind of like the god of the underdogs because he shouldn't have succeeded in all these things, but he did. And there's also cool stories about where he got arrogant and was brought up short because of it. And the fact that this people that so many, or this god that so many people in Western Africa revered, and then through the Caribbean and stuff with the slave trade and stuff, Anansi was a very important figure. Stuff like this. And again, this is why I think we need to get role-playing games out of Europe, because there's so many other cool stories and things, and we could get such a great understanding if we would just allow ourselves.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a perfect example of a respectful way to do it, because for me, generally, my rule of thumb when somebody, because oftentimes people will come to me and kind of ask me, do you think this is acceptable? And I'm like, well, Black people aren't a monolith, so I can't let you know if it's acceptable for all of us, but I can let you know what I think. And so generally what I tell people is, if
do you ever want to say, I was not elected the spokesperson?
Yes, so often.
I mean, I'd be happy to help you, but you can't take my word and then go piss off every other Black person you met because I said something that you thought was okay.
Mm-hmm. It's a whole other extra responsibility that I kind of do resent sometimes. But I generally
and it's
say
not
to people,
fair.
It's not
no. fair.
And so I always say to people, here's the rule of thumb. If you have a character and you take their skin color, their orientation, if you take anything away like that, and it's the same character, then it's probably respectful, because that means that you have built a fully rounded and developed person, and then you've made a decision that you want that person to be diverse. Versus wanting, some people will go, oh, I want diversity, and then they'll create a stereotype of a character. And it's like, okay, well, how does it look if that character's white? And they go, well, it doesn't make sense. And it goes, well, then that might be a bit of a problem, right?
Mm-hmm. That's a good rule.
And so that's perfect, because what you described, it's like, I can see him and I can picture him perfectly, and the motivations and the knowledge and everything. And again, you can put any other thing in there and it still is an excellent, fully rounded character who has a purpose and has a history and has a personality all on their own that is not determined by essentially it's one of those things, because skin color, it's one of those things that is very, very important and also entirely arbitrary, right? It's something that folks can be proud of, but it's also something that folks can use to demonize somebody, and it's so many things. But at the end of the day, it is quite arbitrary, because we are at our core all human beings that are entirely individual, that do what we do and think what we think and feel what we feel, often independently from that. And yes, our experience will shape us, but that's society's view of us shaping that more than it is who we inherently are. I was raised, my mom is white and my sister is white, and so I was kind of raised very much on that spectrum of my upbringing. My father immigrated to Canada from Jamaica. We didn't really talk much about the history or the family or anything like that. And it's so many people had these expectations of my behavior or my interests or what have you. And it took me a really long time to understand where they were coming from. And when I realized that they were drawing these conclusions just because of the pigmentation in my skin, that was the point where it was like, okay, this is very frustrating. But again, if it's just, I don't know, I think that that's just so important, and I could ramble about that for forever, but I will not. But I will say, so normally
right.
we ask DMs, what's your dream campaign in terms of length and progression and story? But I want to add a two-parter to that for you as well. So I want to know what your dream campaign is in terms of, the length and the progression and the story. But I also want to know, what was your longest campaign?
Okay, so my dream campaign would be, it doesn't end until everybody in the gaming group dies. And I'm talking the players, not the characters.
Mm-hmm.
I love being able to dig in to, you progress and you get cool abilities, but, why did Bilbo leave and agree to go with the dwarves? Why does Gandalf wander all around and appear out of the trees out of nowhere? Why did Aragorn, with all his abilities and nobility, run away from his responsibilities? Those are the things that I want to dig into, and the interactions, the long-term, when you start playing a character, you have some notions, and then some things happen, and they had this really cool experience, and that shaped them some. And then they had this really close shave where they almost died. And are they now? Do they have a PTS kind of reaction anytime they see a hobgoblin? Or those things where the story builds and builds and builds. And unfortunately, the older I've gotten, it's just hard to do. I mean, that's easy when you're in high school. You don't have any responsibilities. You meet after school. So yeah, that's great. I mean, I don't mind doing one shots and stuff. They're fun. Quick little, hey, let's just play whatever. But yeah, I would love to. Have a 3, 4, 5 year campaign.
Oh, and just really dig into everything.
Even longer.
I love that.
And as far as the longest one, that first group we played together probably, at least that first core group, I want to say like 6 years, and I was the DM most of the time, and it was just like I just kept adding pieces of paper, and the world was growing. And that's another cool thing, that the players don't just grow, the world grows and the lore grows. So it's this whole, it's this bond that all the players have. I still talk with some of my friends, and you remember when Yarbo started that bar fight, and just stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I guess probably 5, 6 years was the longest continuous campaign I ever had. Shortly after I was in the Navy, I got to my ship. There was a core group of us, and this was actually something really fun that I think is a good way to help DMs get a break and actually play. Me and one of my friends, what we did this. It was so weird. We would basically, one of us would be running it, and then we would physically tag out, like in wrestling. And the other person would take over DMing. And he was such a bugger, because what he would do is he would set the scene, this really tense scene, and then he'd tag out. I'm like, what? Wait a minute. I don't know what you bastard. So
amazing.
That's hilarious.
But no, seriously, co-DMing is something, obviously, the two people need to be able to work together, and you need to be able to trust that, each person as a player will not be using knowledge that their character wouldn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's and I've been able to do that like 2 or 3 times, and that's a lot of fun, because then you get to have the best of both worlds.
Of course.
So yeah, but ideally, like one of the things you mentioned in there, I really think 5 is like the perfect number.
I like that,
because you got just enough people, first of all, to cover most of your bases as far as the abilities you need, but you've also got an odd number to break ties when the party's arguing.
Ooh.
Oh, I hadn't considered that. That's a good point.
That is a good point.
If you've played D&D more than 5 minutes, parties will argue about everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And sometimes it's fun to just let it play out, as long as they're doing this in character. Sometimes I'll just sit back, and especially like when they're trying to like how to figure out to proceed in the dungeon. It's like a really simple solution, and they're so paranoid, and they're so overthinking it. They're going all these possibilities, and I'm just sitting there, and sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, damn, that was a good idea. I wish I would have thought of that. But I'm not saying it. I'm just sitting there with the "you can try" thing in the face.
The best and worst words to hear from a DM.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Or why don't you give me a perception check? That's a scary thing right there.
Yeah.
Our DM says that to me at least once a session. I dread it every time. My passive perception is better. I don't want to roll.
Like a place that's, especially you're in a place that it should be safe. You expect it to be safe, and everybody give me a perception check. What? No.
So
it's noon, for God's sake. It's broad daylight. What do you? No. And then, of course, like I've seen this on Twitter that what do you do as a DM sometimes to scare your players? Now, I'm of the school that I don't fudge rolls. I used to sometimes, because I hated to see players fail, so I was always fudging in favor of the players. But I quit doing that, and I'll tell you why in a second. But I still, like, for instance, if a rogue's doing a stealth check, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people, it's really hard to roleplay being stealthy if they know they failed. So you keep the result secret. Or if, you're going off of passive perception, whether they found something or not, you can roll, and you don't necessarily want to let them know the results right away.
Right.
Now, if you want to build tension with a party, one of the best things you can do if you have a DM screen, and it doesn't even matter which ones they are, just grab a few dice and just kind of randomly roll and look at them and pause for a moment and then just keep talking.
Oh, that's nefarious.
Because see, that dice roll meant nothing, but the players don't know that. And so they're on edge now and they're like, oh, but the thing about it is it shakes them out of their complacency because now it's urgent. It's like, oh my gosh, is something going to happen?
Mm-hmm. It's a great atmosphere tool.
And then sometimes they're so into it and they're coming up with a plan and stuff. It's like, oh my God, they're working so hard. Okay, I got to come up with something now. So,
Oh my goodness. That's absolutely...
Now, I will say one thing. As I've gotten older and time has been at a premium, because I was like 99% homebrew. I mean, I'm like making stuff up on the spot. But, when you're a bunch of kids and you've got all the time in the world, that's fine. Looking up stuff for an encounter. But, like I said, I was doing drop-ins at a game store. Your time's at a premium, and so I'm finding that I'm starting to appreciate pre-written stuff better, just because everything's right there. Mm-hmm. And I can still freestyle some of it. And sometimes there's stuff I'll be, I've read through the module, I'm like, that's dumb. What? Okay, we're not doing that. But it's still, you've got all the stuff ready. So, so the players aren't waiting for you to set everything up and look through books and whatever, because their time is important too. Mm-hmm. And, by the same token, at first, like I mentioned, I'm a trog, which for those of you who don't know is short for troglodyte, which is basically, technology hard. But no, seriously, some of the tools at first I was a little bit leery because, I didn't want to look stupid with this technology. But I will say, for instance, Roll20, I love it.
Oh, yeah.
Because, in just an hour, I can have the encounter all set up, and then all we got to do is everybody just rolls the dice and we have fun. It makes it easier for me. It makes it more fun for the players. And so, this is another evolution in gaming that I'm really excited to see because, one of the biggest problems with TTRPGs is that, they can sometimes be plotting. And especially, when I was coming up, the first video game I played was Pong with the wired controllers from Sears. But, you've got kids that are coming up with these, the first video game they ever played is this hyper photorealistic, looks more real than real life type things. And the combat happens fast and all these things happens fast. And, you as DM, you're trying to compete with that and not bore people. So, these electronic aids, they're very nice. Even, once I get back to where, got an in-person group again, I will probably just put everything on Roll20 and then just show my laptop screen. Because I think it's just smoother that way. And,
well, there's nothing
that's
wrong
one of the things
with...
that's exciting about how, RPGs are moving forward because, first, everything was on pencils and paper, whatever. And then, all these cool video games. And then it started regressing back to pencil and paper. And then for lots of different reasons, there's kind of a melding of the tool. And it's just exciting because I think it's, the hybrid just makes everything better, I think.
Well, exactly. There's nothing wrong with taking the elements that streamline those kind of like, I don't want to call them boring moments, but let's call them like a little bit slower moments. The things that help streamline that, make that smoother. You're not losing any sort of like purity of the medium, so to speak, by incorporating those things, and yet you still get that tactile feel.
Well, especially
of
like when you're
dice.
a dork like me and you set up an encounter. One of the things I like to do for tension, like the fights in the Lord of the Rings, where it's like they're taking out thousands of orcs, right? That's really cool. But the thing is, the way things are written, there's no player could do that. However, if you make all those orcs only have 1 hit point, there's the tension of, oh my god, there's a lot of them, but there's the excitement of, yeah, I'm mowing through them.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. You know?
I love that.
You give your players that feeling. All right, so listeners, we're going to jump into one of the best mini games that we've come up with for this podcast. We're going to now put Shane on the spot. So Shane, you have 1 minute to explain either your most recent campaign, your favorite campaign, whatever you choose, to a stranger who has never heard of D&D. Think of it like an elevator pitch. And so I'm going to start a timer here. I'll give you a 3, 2, 1, go. And just as much as you can get inside that 1 minute, when you hear the beeping, the timer is over. Are you ready to play the game, Shane?
Let's do this.
All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so you remember when you were a little kid and you played cowboys and Indians, your cops and robbers and stuff, and you're having fun running around, but there's always that one kid who's like, I shot you. No, you didn't. Well, now imagine there's somebody there that can arbitrate and say, yeah, he did shoot you, Bob. All right? Now, just imagine that you're not just playing cops and robbers. You could be Spiderman. You could be the Dragon Lord. You could be James Bond. You could be John Wick. You could be anybody you wanted to. You have your job, you have your life, but who do you really want to be? And you could do that, and you're doing it with friends, and you're creating this cool, fun story. And at the end of it, you're like, "Holy crap! What did we just do? This was so much fun." That's what RPGs are about: letting yourself free, being who you want to be that maybe you can't be because we can't all be Iron Man, right? But you could be here.
Oh, I'm sold. Where do I sign up? That sounds excellent.
You know what I love about your response to that so much is, regardless of you didn't jump into any specifics, but I love that you just showed it's letting your imagination free. It's letting all of those ideas and those concepts and those things that have been bouncing around in your brain for who knows how many years out.
But there's also...
Well, and full disclosure, most of my campaigns, I'm only like about 15 minutes ahead of the players most of the time because, like I say, I'm a mega homebrewer. So one of the few advantages of having ADD is you can do stuff like that because that's how your mind works anyway. So
that's perfect.
You get to just run with your strengths.
And so I do have to almost circle back a little bit too, because we were kind of talking a bit about how part of it is having that person to say, no, Bob, he did shoot you. So my question is how, right? Like it's valid, right? So it's like, how do you deal with conflicts or disagreements between players?
And I'm going to expand that a little bit too, because I remember you mentioning that one time where a disagreement in game escalated to people, pushing and shoving. And so whether it be like a small one or a big one, how do you sort of tackle those across that spectrum?
Well, again, part of it is foundational, how you start. Even before I knew what a session zero was, I think it's a beautiful term. And especially if we were bringing a new player in, I kind of want to make sure everybody was on the same page. But even the best friends. I had a couple friends in school. We would have done anything for each other, but there were a couple times we wanted to kill each other. So there's going to be disagreements, especially you're doing a high adrenaline type of thing, with your imagination. So as a DM. You've got a lot going on, but you need to be attentive, not just to what the players are saying, but, you can't be buried behind a screen. You got to be looking at their faces. You got to be looking at body language. And not just necessarily to head off a disagreement, but maybe somebody's closing off because of the way everybody else is acting at the table. And, that's another thing. That's another type of conflict that, the person doesn't feel comfortable standing for themselves when they withdraw. And that's not fair. To them. And I mean, not really fair to the table either, because then they're losing out because this player is not engaging anymore. The first thing I try and do, if I start to see something going, I will take a breath, take a beat, and say, hey, are we okay here? Is something going on? Are you guys okay? And give them the space to say, hey, I didn't appreciate you doing this to my character, or sometimes you'll be rolling, and sometimes as the DM and one particular player, they've got this rapport going, and other people at the table are getting frustrated because one person's getting all the limelight. That's a big source of conflict. One of the hard kind of work parts of DMing is you've got to manage the personalities. Mm-hmm. So one suggestion that I learned, and I'm going to throw in a quick shout out real quick, RPG Research, if you want to look them up, rpgresearch.com, doing a lot of really cool stuff using role-playing games in the community, both for fun, but also the head of it, Hawk Robinson, he is a recreational therapist, and he's got a couple other people who are also recreational therapists working with him. So anyway, rpgresearch.com, check him out. Great organization. Anyway, one of the things that he taught me to help manage the whole limelight thing, a timer, just a sand timer. 2 minutes is good. You let the player go for 2 minutes, and then you move on to the next person. And this is especially good with kids, but sometimes, adults need to be reined in.
For sure.
And you can even, go Lord of the Flies. You pass the timer around. Whoever's got the timer, that's the only character that's allowed to talk at that time, which is especially important. Like, you get a high action thing. Like a really good example is like, say some people, two people rolled the same initiative, right? Mm-hmm. And they both want to do something, but it's going to have different effects, but they rolled the same initiative. So how do you decide who goes first, right? Or since they're both acting at the same time, maybe you give this person a chance to talk, and they get to enact part of what they're doing, and then the other person enacts part of what they're doing, and so it's happening simultaneously. Just basically trying to find ways to be fair about managing the game. Because, I mean, how many times have we read stories where, two heroes are working at cross purposes and they end up invariably, messing each other up and making it easier for the villain, right?
Right, of course.
Well, we could do that at the gaming table, couldn't we? When it starts devolving into where the characters are gone and the players are in conflict with each other personally, like I say, I try and take a beat. I try and stop that as soon as possible. Because, first of all, I don't want to mess up the game, but sometimes there'll be a little spark of something, and then it seems to blow over. But then outside, after the game, big arguments start, and that's how gaming groups break up. Is they don't, if there's a big issue, I mean, it's uncomfortable. I am very conflict averse, but you know what? I'm more averse to having the game break down because we don't talk about these things. And if I have found that if people are given a chance to just give their side and also hear the other person, they're like, oh, hey, I didn't really realize like I was doing that. I'm sorry I stepped on your toes. I found the best thing you can do, if it starts to become a player versus player thing, then you want to stop and, maybe that's a good time. Everybody takes a bathroom break, whatever. And you discuss with the people involved with the conflict, bearing in mind that sometimes it's not just two people.
Right.
Sometimes it can be, 2 or 3, or half the table one way and half the other, and so, then you definitely need to stop and have a whole table. Okay, how did we get here? Because, there's few things more heartbreaking than a group that has been playing together and then, out of game stuff is too big and the campaign just dies midstream because of personal feelings that aren't dealt with very well.
Right.
And having said that, I have not always done a good job of it. I mean, these are the things that I try to do. And every once in a while you get a situation where two people just rub each other the wrong way. It's unfortunate, but sometimes it's maybe it's just a sign that, okay, maybe we do need to end this campaign. We don't want to increase hard feelings, whatever. And I hate to do that. Fortunately, I've only had to do that a few times, but it's at least for me, whether I'm a player or I'm a DM, I mean, I'm in this. I put every character I've made, no matter how diverse, there is a very important emotional piece of me in that character, in every character I've ever made. And there have been some NPCs that I put a lot of work because I think the players really like it. And then, the campaign's just over, and it's like you've got a big Band-Aid on a hairy chest, and you just yank.
What an image.
But the thing is, sometimes for everybody concerned at the table, unfortunately, you just need to realize, hey, we need to step away.
Yeah.
Hopefully, between having a very open and frank session 0 and checking in, really important thing, after each session, I always ask, did everybody have fun? Was there anything that I did that you didn't particularly like, or you would have liked me to see done a little bit differently? And you're leaving yourself open as a DM for all kinds of criticism, but 99% of the time, everybody had a great time. They're just glad, holy crap, we've got a DM who's running a game for us. That's awesome. And, most players, if you did something that really bugs them, because they're emotionally invested too, they're going to say, hey, this, I felt like this was unrealistic. I felt like we didn't have a good enough chance to fight back, or I felt like, this group of NPCs' reaction was a bit excessive, whatever. And, sometimes we have conversations and it's like, okay, now your characters wouldn't know this, but this is what's going on, and, this is why I did what I did. And then there's other times I'll be like, you know what? That was kind of rude. That was, I kind of took your guys' agency. I set up an unfair situation, whatever the case may be. And, it's to really be a good DM, you have to be willing to admit, hey, you were wrong. Now, having said that, I do have a rule that I put in session 0s that, if there's a disagreement between, me as a DM and a player, that, unless it's something really, really huge that they feel really strongly about, my thing is that, we'll talk about it at the end of the session. And, if I feel like I really made a mistake, I will find a way, we'll fix it. I'll retcon it if we have to next session or whatever. So, you have to be flexible. You're the DM, you're the referee, but, the players are also there for their enjoyment, and you need to respect that. You're going to need to have a thick skin too, because, there's going to be times, you thought you created this really cool thing, and for whatever reason, it just kind of fell flat. And, the players kind of, whatever. And, it's not anything personal against you. They just didn't, have as much fun as they thought, or it didn't come off the way you thought it would, whatever. And unless someone is directly attacking you personally, you can't really take this stuff personally, because, it's just fun. It's a game, and, you've got diverse personalities, and sometimes personalities rub each other the wrong way. It's just, as long as I think the biggest thing is that, before the session, you're having a recap. Hey, did we have any problems last session? And afterwards, you have a frank discussion. Hey, what did you guys like? What did you not like? And, you're keeping that communication going. It's going to make you better as a DM. Your players are going to trust you more because you feel invested in, them having fun. you'll be able to hone your craft better as a DM, because sometimes stuff that you thought really sucked, the players are just like, oh, that was great. And you're like, okay, well, I thought it was a stinker, but they liked it, so duly noted.
Yeah.
So getting back to my first DMing experience ever, there are people, I think that, obviously we need to have some framework, some rules, or we're just going to be, back to cops and robbers and no, you didn't shoot me.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, people get too married to the rules. And I will also say in 5th edition, there's a lot of stuff that there's not really any kind of a good rule for, so you got to kind of make it up.
Right.
But beyond that, I think there's some, whether it's due to lack of confidence or whatever, a player wants to use an ability in a really weird and strange and unprescribed way. And there's so many DMs, it's like, well, there's no rule for that. And to which I say, but you're the rules.
Yeah, exactly. You're the dungeon master. You're not
master.
You're not the dungeon steward.
I will say for myself, I prefer the term game runner.
Fair enough.
Because the whole I just, as I've come along, the term dungeon master sounds so adversarial, and there's some people who play that way. And I do not like sitting at those tables. There was one guy in the Navy, and this was one of the first times we ever had to. We didn't necessarily break up a group. We just removed him from said group because, first of all, as a DM, he was. I mean, it was just, every session he was trying to find a way to grind our characters and just make it a hurtful experience. And how is that fun?
Oh.
And so then. I was running, and as a player, he was like, when he was in the spot, he was always being disruptive, whatever. And finally, we're like, look, man, it's just every session has a problem with you. And I felt really bad. And the problem was, we're all on the same ship together, so we see each other all the time. But it's just like, well, okay, he's not in our gaming group now. And that was the first time I ever had to ask a player not to come back, and it was so freaking hard because it was just like, like I said, I love this stuff. This is like, it's very core, and to tell someone, no, you can't play in our game anymore.
And especially for you, for someone who wants people to have so much fun, like,
and everyone to play,
and everyone to get to play, that must have been like honestly heart-wrenching for you.
But when you're hurting the rest of the players, and anybody who, DMs for a long time, that it's going to happen. Every DM that I've talked to who's DM for more than like a year, there's always one, and it's hard. But when that situation comes up, you need to think of the rest of the table. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I'm conflict averse. It was, I seriously, later that day, I found a spot and I actually cried. I felt so bad that it came to that. And I kept thinking, was there something that I could have done differently? And every time I kept turning it over and over, and it was just like, no, he kept doing it. He kept pushing these things. And, he basically pushed the rest of us to that decision. And, I finally made peace with it that way. But it was just, oh.
Yeah, that's understandable.
It was rough.
Yeah.
Because, I'm always, I'm always thinking of my players, seeing it through their eyes. And, I'm imagining what this guy was going through. It was just like, But, at the end of the day, he brought it on himself. And, whatever personal issues that he had led him to be that way, I feel bad for him, but it was unhealthy for everybody else. So he had to go.
Yeah. And that's very fair. I think honestly that is an excellent way to handle interplayer conflict, especially when it's with every other player. So, and I'm going to speak to you for a second here, listeners. So I'm stuck in this position where there's so many more things I need to ask you, Shane, and there's so many more things that I need to hear your stories of and hear your take on. So, listeners, this is officially you hearing that Shane will be back for a part 2 because there's just far too much. But before this
Possibly
episode,
3.
possibly 3, possibly 20. I mean, if you, as much as you want to come back, we want to have you. Let me just put that out there right now. Like, but I don't think this.
I will say that I am. Once I learn to stream, my youngest, he's going to teach me and stuff. I do plan on start doing a Twitch stream, not scream. Or well, scream, I don't know. But a Twitch stream and podcast, basically just giving people tips on how to DM. Because the biggest thing, I guess, that I want to cut off with right here, I think Critical Role is really cool. I've only seen one episode, but I think it's great. But the one thing I've noticed, everybody seems to think they need to be Matt Mercer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you right now, Matt Mercer himself said you do not need to be Matt Mercer.
Mm-hmm.
As long as everybody is having fun, you don't have to be perfect. You don't need to know all the rules. My first 3 months of DMing, I didn't know any of the rules.
Yep. And
we were having fun. And maybe you're not a Titanic storyteller. Again, if people are having fun, that's okay. Maybe you can't do 100 character voices. That's okay. If you want to run a game for your friends, don't worry about how other people do it. Just have fun. Run the game. It's okay to fit. The only way to truly screw up being a DM or even a player, the only truly way to do it wrong is to be an ass to the other people at the table. And if you're not doing that, then you're okay.
That's perfect.
Well said.
And I feel like this episode, though, would not be complete without what I consider, you know what? No, I've committed. With what I consider one of the most important questions, and I think it'll be the most beautiful way to end off this part 1 of this episode. And so, what is it about this particular medium, D&D, TTRPGing, that if you had to distill it down, that has captured your interest and passion so wholly and so incredibly?
Well, I think it's such a unique experience because, first of all, it's cooperative. Yeah, the DM's running it, but everybody's working together, and you get to be the most coolest, craziest version of yourself that you could ever possibly be. And not only, you could just, be imagining this in your head, but you're sitting there with a group that's sitting there saying, yes, it's okay. You're basically, by group consensus, you are all allowing each other to be this cool version of yourself. And you're working together towards this common goal, and it's fun. And there's just a bond that I don't think there's any other activity that... Because, so many things are competitive, right? But this is cooperative. You're working together, and you get to feel good about yourself, and you're making friends, and you're making cool memories. Even if they're imagination memories, they're still memories. It's still fun. And, for a while, you can take all the crap in your world, and let's be honest, there's a lot of crap right now. You can put all that aside, and you can get some joy. And not just for yourself, but with other people. And you're going to have that forever. That, that time that you did the cool thing. That's always going to be there. And that's what I love about it. And people from... Vin Diesel taught Dame Judi Dench to play Dungeons and Dragons, and now she DMs for her grandchildren. What other medium could have such a wholesome story as that, right?
That's beautiful.
How freaking cool. Plus, can you imagine Judi Dench as your DM? Holy crap, would that not be off the wall?
That would be a transcendent experience.
How amazing would that be? But I also think of the really sweet characters she plays. Oh, yes, dear, you've killed the orcs. That's so wonderful, dear. And then I remember the character that she played in James Bond, and that's probably more how she DMs, actually.
Probably. Or somewhere right down the middle.
So, yeah, just that cooperative love and joy that I really don't think you could get any other way.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. And with that, I think...
And the nice thing is, it's not like drug induced or anything, so it's not bad for your health.
There you go. D&D, good for heart, good for body, good for mind.
I
it's
love
just
that.
across the board.
Yes.
100%.
Oh yeah. And so with that, we're going to wrap up part 1 of Romantic Dinner with Shane. And listeners, we have a question for you. With all of the incredible, the 40 plus years of experience that Shane has, and as we've alluded to throughout this episode, we have so many questions and so many conversations we want to have with Shane. But listeners, what are some of the things you want to know about? What are some of the things you want to ask Shane? If you have a question in mind, if you have some thoughts or some queries or what have you, let us know, whether it be through Twitter, through Discord, through commenting on the podcast, whether you're listening to it on any of the various podcast sites or YouTube, whatever it is. Let us know what you want to ask Shane, and we will try and take all those and bring it up when we come back with part 2 of X part series.
That's a great question. You're brilliant.
And just before we do this quick sign off here, Shane, we're going to be doing this a couple of times, I think, but what would you like to, go ahead. The floor is yours for the next, few minutes.
Where can we find you?
Yeah,
what are you up to? Where can the
exactly.
folks get more Shane? Do you have an idea for the name of your Twitch show? Let us know.
Well, just for right now, look for updates on my Twitter, at AuldShaneGamer. And, just for right now, I want to just say I appreciate the opportunity to share my love. There's so many other tidbits and things I want to share with you. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about my experience with RPG research, but we'll get to that later. But most of all of you who are listening, who share this love, the biggest thing I just want to say is thanks for playing.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Romantic Dinner with the DM. We are so excited to have you on our journey as we learn about the worlds and stories created by dungeon masters and game masters in this wonderful, wonderful medium of TTRPGs.
We've got new episodes coming out weekly, and if you're jonesing for new content in between, check out our YouTube.
Link below.
And follow us on twitch.tv/Arcad and Prime.
We'll see you next week and really hope that you enjoyed the episode. Bye.